My name is Samantha Hayes. I'm 27 years old, and until about 3 weeks ago, I thought I understood the difference between distance and disconnection. Turns out I didn't. I work as a field technician for a telecom company, which is a fancy way of saying I spend most of my life living out of a suitcase, installing network infrastructure in places that never feel like mine. Hotels blur together after a while. Same beige walls, same overly loud air conditioning, same lonely glow of a TV playing something you're not really watching. The pay is good. More than good, actually. Around $86,000 a year, plus per diem. But the trade-off? You slowly become a ghost in your own life. Your mail piles up, your fridge turns into a science experiment, and your relationships, they survive on FaceTime calls and promises you hope still mean something by the time you get back. I had a girlfriend. Her name was Emma Carter. We'd been together for about a year and a half. We met at a friend's cookout, one of those lazy summer afternoons where everything feels easy and permanent in a way it never actually is. Ethan had this energy about him. He could walk into a room full of strangers and, within minutes, have everyone laughing like they'd known him for years. I fell for that. Hard. Back then, I thought it meant he was special. Now I know it just meant he was good at making everyone feel like they were. And when everyone feels special, no one really is. But that realization came later. At the time, things felt good, stable, easy. Or at least easy enough. I was living in a 3-bedroom house with my roommate, Daniel. He'd moved in about 2 years ago after my previous roommate relocated. Daniel was quiet, kept to himself, worked remotely as an IT project manager. We weren't close, but we got along. Shared bills, occasionally watched football on Sundays. That kind of functional coexistence that doesn't ask for much and usually doesn't cause problems. He had a girlfriend, Rachel. They'd been together for 3 years and were planning a wedding for the following spring. Rachel was the organized type, color-coded binders, detailed timelines, the kind of woman who made chaos look like a solvable problem. I liked her. That matters, because if I hadn't, maybe what I did later would have felt different. Or maybe it wouldn't have mattered at all. 4 months ago, I got assigned to a massive project, the kind that people in my field talk about like it's a career milestone, 16 weeks minimum. Long days, big responsibility, a real opportunity. Ethan wasn't thrilled. We'd had the "you travel too much" conversation more times than I could count. He said it made him feel like he came second to my job. I told him this project mattered, that it was temporary, that I'd be back before he knew it. He said he understood. He didn't. The first month, everything was normal. We talked every night, texted throughout the day, sent each other stupid memes and good morning messages like nothing had changed. Month 2, the calls got shorter. He was tired more often, busy, distracted. I didn't think much of it. I was working 12-hour days myself. Sometimes I was the one too exhausted to talk. Distance does that. It blurs effort until you can't tell who stopped trying first. Month 3, something shifted. He started asking about my return date. Not in the "I miss you, come home soon" way. More like, "Do you think they might extend the project? Don't rush back on my account." At the time, I thought he was being supportive. Now I understand he was being literal. The text came on a Tuesday morning. 7:14 a.m. I remember the time because I stared at it long enough for it to burn into my brain. I was sitting in my car in a hotel parking lot, eating a gas station breakfast burrito that tasted like regret and preservatives. My phone buzzed. "Ethan, we need to talk." Then another message. "I'm pregnant. It's yours." I stared at the screen for a full minute. Then I did the math. I'd been gone for 14 weeks. 14. For his statement to be true, he would have had to know for weeks already, or gotten pregnant right before I left and somehow hidden it for almost 4 months. Neither option made sense. There was only one explanation that did, and it made the burrito in my hand taste like cardboard. I sat there for about 10 minutes, just breathing. Then I typed back, "Congratulations." Pause. "What's his name?" The typing bubbles appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. 2 full minutes of hesitation. Finally, "What do you mean?" I leaned back in my seat, suddenly very calm. "I mean the father. What's his name? Because I've been 1,200 miles away for 14 weeks, and I'm pretty sure biology still works the same way." No response. Not for an hour. Then my phone rang. I answered. He was crying. Not quiet tears, not controlled emotion. Full breakdown. The kind where every word has to fight its way through guilt. The truth came out in pieces. Ugly, fragmented, unavoidable. She'd been sleeping with Daniel, my roommate. It started about 6 weeks after I left. He said he was lonely, that Daniel was there. That one night turned into another. And another. It just happened, he said. Like gravity had dragged them into the same bed over and over again. I didn't interrupt. I didn't yell. I just listened, because sometimes the truth doesn't need help sounding ridiculous. When he finally stopped talking, I asked one question. Does Rachel know? Silence. Then, no, and you can't tell her. That would ruin everything. I looked out at the empty parking lot. Everything was already ruined. Rachel doesn't deserve to be hurt like this, he added quickly. I let that sit between us for a second. Then I said, but I do? He didn't answer. Of course he didn't. I hung up, turned my phone off, went to work, installed a fiber line like nothing had changed, ate lunch alone, turned my phone back on at 6 p.m., 22 missed calls, dozens of messages. I didn't read any of them. Instead, I did something very simple, very calm, very deliberate. I screenshot everything. The pregnancy text, my response, his confession, every word, every timestamp. No edits, no gaps, just the truth. Then I opened a new message. To Rachel. My fingers hovered over the screen for a second. Not because I was unsure, but because I knew this was the point where everything would split into before and after. Then I typed, hey, I'm really sorry to be the one to tell you this, but I think you deserve to see it before anyone has a chance to change the story. I attached the screenshots and hit send. Then I ordered room service, turned on a show I don't remember, and went to sleep. Because sometimes the most terrifying thing isn't chaos. It's how quiet everything feels right after you've set it in motion. Rachel read the messages at 11:43 p.m. I know that because the read receipt popped up on my phone like a quiet confirmation that there was no going back now. 15 minutes later, everything detonated. My phone lit up like it was having a seizure. But not from her. From Daniel, 11:58 p.m. What did you do? I stared at that message longer than I probably needed to. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I can explain. Not even, please tell me this isn't what it looks like. Just, what did you do? It was almost impressive. The level of audacity it takes to sleep with your roommate's boyfriend in her house for weeks, and then react to the truth like you're the victim. I typed back. I forwarded some texts. Sounds like you've got a call to take. He didn't respond. I didn't expect him to, because at that exact moment, somewhere across town, Rachel was probably standing in front of him with her phone in her hand and her entire future collapsing in real time. The next morning, I called the one person I trust when things stopped making emotional sense. My friend Marcus. We met in college, and he's the kind of person who processes chaos like it's a spreadsheet. Numbers, timelines, facts. Exactly what I needed. I told him everything. Every detail, every text, every timeline inconsistency that had led me to that parking lot realization. He didn't interrupt, didn't react emotionally. When I finished, he exhaled slowly and said, okay, first question, what's your lease situation? I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was the most Marcus response possible. My lease doesn't end for another 5 months, I said. Both my name and Daniel's are on it. So you can't just leave. Nope, not without paying a penalty, about $2,400. And you're not paying that. Absolutely not. Good, he said. Then don't make any decisions until you're back home. Document everything. Keep communication in writing. And don't let them bait you into anything emotional. I leaned back against the stiff hotel chair. For the first time since the text, I felt steady. Got it, I said. Also, he added, don't underestimate how messy people get when they're cornered. He wasn't wrong. Over the next 3 days, everything got messy. My ex-boyfriend went into full damage control mode. He started calling people, mutual friends, friends he'd met through me, even people I hadn't talked to in months. And he told them his version of the story. In his version, I was emotionally unavailable. I chose work over the relationship. I abandoned him for months at a time. And now he was pregnant and scared. And instead of supporting him, I was punishing him. It was almost impressive. The way he managed to tell a story that sounded just believable enough to make people hesitate. The part he left out? That the baby wasn't mine. That he'd been sleeping with my roommate. That the entire situation existed because of choices he made while I was working 12-hour days to build a future I thought included him. Then came the texts. Non-stop. But not apologies. Demands. You need to be mature about this. This is private. You had no right to involve Rachel. That wasn't your secret to tell. I read that one twice. Then I screenshot it. Because the audacity was so pure, it deserved documentation. I finally replied, you made it my business the second you tried to tell me I was responsible for your pregnancy. 3 dots. Then, I'm keeping the baby. Pause. And if you don't help me, I'll tell people you abandoned your pregnant boyfriend. I felt something shift inside me then. Not anger, not even hurt. Just clarity. It's not my baby, I typed. You told me that yourself. His reply came instantly. No one else knows that. I stared at the screen, then typed, Rachel does. No response. Just silence. Then finally, you're a terrible person. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Meanwhile, Daniel had his own version of damage control. Rachel confronted him that night, and apparently he went with the classic. It was a one-time mistake. I actually laughed when I heard that. Because even from 1,200 miles away, I knew that was a lie. Rachel didn't believe him either. She went through his phone. And what she found wasn't one mistake. It was a pattern. 10 weeks of messages, plans, timing, conversations about how guilty they felt, and how alive it made them feel anyway. Texts about coordinating meetups around Rachel's work schedule. And one message that stuck with me longer than I'd like to admit. He won't be back until March. We have plenty of time. Time. That's what they thought they had. Time to lie. Time to hide. Time to build something behind my back while I was out building something for us. Rachel called me the next day. I expected anger, or at least tension. What I got instead was something worse. Calm. The kind of calm that only comes when someone has already processed the worst part. Hi, she said quietly. Hi. I just need to confirm something. Okay. When did you leave for your project? I told her. How long have you been gone? 14 weeks. Did you have any idea? No. A pause. Then, thank you for telling me. I closed my eyes for a second. You deserve to know. Another pause. Then she said something that felt like the final nail in a coffin neither of us had built. I'm not marrying him. And then she hung up. That should have been the moment Daniel realized what he'd done. The consequences. The reality. It wasn't. Because the next day he called me. And the first thing out of his mouth wasn't remorse. It was blame. You just destroyed my entire life. I leaned against the wall of my hotel room, staring at the ceiling. No, I said calmly. You did that. She canceled the wedding, he snapped. Do you understand what that means? The deposits alone. Sounds expensive. Over $12,000. That's a lot of money. You didn't have to tell her. I let that sit for a second, then said very quietly, you didn't have to sleep with my boyfriend in my house. Silence. Then, it wasn't planned. It just happened. I almost smiled. 10 weeks of coordinating schedules around your girlfriend's work shifts isn't an accident, I said. That's project management. He hung up on me. But the fallout didn't stop there. His mother called me that evening. I didn't recognize the number at first. Hi, she said, her voice tight. This is Daniel's mom. I already knew where this was going. I understand there's been a situation, she continued. And I just think, given everything, it would be kind of you to show some compassion. He's going through a very hard time. I stared out the window at the parking lot below. Ma'am, I said carefully, your son has been sleeping with my boyfriend in my home for 10 weeks while I was working out of state. A pause. Then, well, maybe if you had been home more, this wouldn't have happened. I blinked. Once. Twice. Have a good evening, I said, and hung up. Because there are some conversations that don't deserve to continue. Then came the financial mess. Daniel texted me, I'm not paying rent this month. I read it twice. Then once more, just to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding the level of delusion. The living situation is hostile, he added. You created that hostility. I didn't even respond to him. I forwarded the message directly to our landlord, along with a short explanation. My roommate is refusing to pay rent. I wanted to make you aware. The landlord replied within an hour. Clear, direct, unemotional. Both names are on the lease. Both parties are responsible. If rent is not paid, I will pursue both tenants, and it will affect both of your credit. I sent that screenshot to Daniel. His response? Then I just won't pay and let the landlord deal with it. I actually laughed. That will wreck your credit too, I replied. You really want to add eviction to your list right now? He didn't respond, but the rent got paid. 2 weeks. That's how long until I would be home. 2 weeks until I'd have to walk back into that house. 2 weeks until everything that had been happening through a screen became real. And for the first time since this started, I felt something close to anticipation. Not for closure, not for reconciliation, but for confrontation. Because some things can't stay distant forever. And when they finally get close enough to touch, that's when you find out what's actually left. Flying home felt unreal. 16 weeks of living out of a suitcase, eating hotel food, working 12-hour days, and managing the slow implosion of my personal life through a phone screen. And then suddenly, I was back. When I landed, I didn't rush. I sat in my truck in the long-term parking lot for a while, hands resting on the steering wheel, just breathing. The air smelled like something familiar, not good or bad, just mine. There was still an old aux cord plugged into the console, the same one Ethan had used to play me songs on long drives. I stared at it for a second, then unplugged it, tossed it into the glove compartment like it didn't matter. Then I drove home. Walking through the front door felt exactly how I expected it to. Awkward, heavy, like stepping into a place that remembered a version of you that didn't exist anymore. Daniel was sitting in the living room, laptop open, working. We made eye contact. He looked worse. Not dramatically, just noticeably. Thinner, pale, dark circles under his eyes. His side of the room, which used to be spotless thanks to Rachel, was cluttered. Takeout containers, empty cans, the kind of mess that builds when no one cares enough to clean it. "Hey," he said. "Hey." That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just two people pretending civility was enough to cover everything else. I walked past him, went to my room, and closed the door. I unpacked slowly. Not because I needed to, because I needed something to do with my hands. At one point I paused, looked around my room, checked the drawers, the closet. Nothing obvious was out of place. But I still checked, because trust doesn't just break. It rewrites how you see everything. That first night I ordered takeout, sat in the kitchen alone. Halfway through eating, Daniel walked in. He grabbed a glass of water, stood there for a second like he was deciding something. Then, "Can we talk?" I didn't look up from my food. "About what?" "The next 5 months, the lease, living here." I chewed slowly, swallowed, then said, "You pay your rent, I pay mine. We stay out of each other's way." "That's it?" "That's it." He shifted his weight. "We can't even be civil?" I looked up at him then. "I am being civil." A pause. Then I added quietly, "Civil is the best you're going to get." He opened his mouth, closed it, then walked back to his room. Conversation over. Ethan started texting again the day before I got home. The tone had changed. Gone were the demands, the accusations. Now it was softer, almost nostalgic. "I miss you. Can we talk when you get back? I know I messed up, but I still love you." I didn't respond. Not once. Because some doors don't need to be slammed. They just need to stay closed. He showed up anyway. Day 2, 7 p.m. No warning. No message. Just knock, knock, knock. I opened the door. And for a second, my brain didn't process what I was seeing. He was pregnant. Visibly. There was no ambiguity left. No space for denial. No part of me that could pretend this was something else. It hit me harder than I expected. Not because I felt anything paternal. I didn't. The math had made sure of that. But because seeing someone you used to love standing in front of you, carrying someone else's child, is one of those moments your brain files under, things you'll never unsee. "Can I come in?" he asked softly. "No." He blinked. "Please, I drove all the way here." "That was your choice." A pause. Then, "Can we just talk?" "We're talking." His eyes filled with tears. And this time, it wasn't fake. I could tell. "I'm scared," he said. "I don't know what I'm doing. The baby's due in 5 months. Daniel won't even acknowledge it. My parents are disappointed in me. I'm barely making enough with my part-time job to cover basic expenses. His voice cracked. "I need help." I leaned against the doorframe, studied him. For a second, I almost saw the person I used to love. Almost. "I'm sorry you're in a difficult situation," I said. And I meant it. But then I added, "But none of that is my responsibility." His expression shifted, like he'd expected something else. "You were supposed to be my person," he said quietly. I let out a small breath. "And you were supposed to not sleep with my roommate for 10 weeks while I was working." Silence. We both got disappointed, I added. That one landed. I could see it. He wiped his eyes, then said something that I think he believed would make me feel guilty. "If you had just been here, none of this would have happened." There it was. I straightened slightly. "I was working," I said evenly, "to pay for the house you used as a place to cheat on me." He opened his mouth, closed it. No comeback. Because there wasn't one. He stood there for a few more seconds, then nodded slowly, like he was finally understanding something he should have understood weeks ago. Then he turned and walked away. I closed the door, locked it, and stood there for a second longer than necessary. Daniel came out of his room a minute later. "Was that him?" "Yeah." He rubbed the back of his neck. "He came by last week too, told me I need to step up." I looked at him. "And?" "I told him I'm not ready to be a father." I held his gaze. "Whether you're ready or not isn't really the question anymore, is it?" He looked away. "I'm not signing anything," he muttered. "That's between you, him, and a family court judge," I said. "Leave me out of it." "She's going to file for child support." "Probably. That could be like $800 a month?" I shrugged. "Sounds about right." He stood there for a second, then went back to his room. I made myself a sandwich. Because at some point, even the most dramatic moments end, and you still have to eat. But this wasn't the end. Not really. Because what comes after betrayal isn't closure. It's consequences. Slow, unavoidable, and a lot less cinematic than people think. Consequences don't arrive all at once. They don't kick the door down or announce themselves with dramatic music. They show up quietly. In court dates. In bank statements. in the way people stop calling you back. Daniel learned that the hard way. Rachel didn't just cancel the wedding. She dismantled everything that had been built around it, and she had every right to. Her family had already put down deposits. A lot of them: venue, caterer, photographer, florist, DJ. Altogether, it came out to just under $13,000. Money spent on a future that no longer existed. They asked him to repay it. He said he couldn't, so her father filed a claim. Small claims court. Daniel laughed when he told me about it. People don't actually win those, he said. It's just TV stuff. I didn't correct him. Sometimes people need to learn things the expensive way. The court date came and went while I was back at work. But I heard all about it afterward. Rachel's father showed up prepared. Receipts, contracts, canceled checks, documentation of every payment. A timeline. Even a notarized statement from Rachel detailing exactly why the wedding had been called off. Daniel showed up with nothing. No lawyer. No evidence. Just the belief that he could talk his way out of consequences the same way he'd talked his way into them. The judge asked him one question. Were your actions the reason this event was canceled? Daniel said, it's complicated. The judge said, it's not. He was ordered to pay $9,400. Not the full amount, but enough. Enough to matter. Enough to follow him for years if he didn't handle it. And that was just the beginning, because there was still the baby. Ethan had tried, briefly, to convince Daniel to take responsibility. That didn't go anywhere. So now it was heading towards something neither of them could avoid. Paternity testing. Child support. Court involvement. Lawyers. Fees. Time. Stress. All the things that come after choices people think they can walk away from. Daniel made decent money, around $75,000 a year. But when you stack it all together, $9,000 in judgment debt. Potentially $800 a month in child support. Higher rent after moving out. Basic living expenses. It adds up. Fast. He went from comfortable, too stretched thin, to living paycheck to paycheck. All in a matter of months. Ethan's consequences were different. Less legal. More social. At first, people believed him. His version of the story was clean. Sympathetic. Designed to make him look like the victim of circumstance instead of the architect of it. But truth has a way of spreading. Especially when it comes with screenshots. I didn't send them to anyone else. I didn't need to. Rachel had them. And Rachel had every reason not to protect him. Within a week, the real story started circulating. Quietly at first, then all at once. Friends who had called me asking what happened stopped asking. Because they already knew. 3 of his closest friends stopped talking to him completely. Not because he got pregnant. No one judged him for that. But because he lied. Because he tried to pin it on me. Because he tried to manipulate people into believing something that wasn't true. His parents found out too. His mom called me. Not to blame me. Not this time. To apologize. She said she raised him better than this. That she was ashamed. That she was sorry for what I'd been dragged into. I accepted the apology. Because it wasn't hers to carry. His dad didn't call. But from what I heard, he didn't need to. Ethan tried to reach out a few more times. At first for help. Then for advice. At one point he texted, "Do you know any good lawyers?" I stared at that message for a long time. Not because I was considering answering, but because I was trying to understand how someone could break something so completely and still think they had access to you afterward. I didn't reply. The lease situation resolved faster than I expected. Marcus helped me put together a proposal. I'd find someone to take over Daniel's half of the lease. In exchange, the landlord would release him early. The landlord agreed, mostly because he didn't want the headache. Within 2 weeks, I had a replacement, a coworker's younger brother. Quiet, clean, paid on time, exactly what I needed. Daniel moved out by the end of the month, into a smaller apartment that cost more than his share of the house had. I helped coordinate the paperwork, kept everything professional, clean, final. A few days after he moved out, he texted me, "I hope you're happy." I read it once, then replied, "I'm not, but I'm not the one who should be unhappy." He didn't respond. Financially, I walked away untouched. No broken lease, no penalties, no debt that wasn't mine. The only thing I lost was something a lot harder to quantify. Some nights the house feels too quiet. Not empty, just unfamiliar. Like it's still adjusting to the version of my life that exists now. I'll find small things sometimes. A coffee mug he used to use. A hoodie he left behind. A random hair tie in the bathroom drawer. And for a second, it catches me off guard. Not because I miss him. I don't. I miss the version of my life where none of this had happened. Where I didn't double-check timelines. Where I didn't question intentions. Where trust wasn't something I had to rebuild piece by piece. My new roommate is easy. We watch football on Sundays. We don't talk about personal things. We don't ask questions we don't need answers to. It's peaceful. And right now, peace feels like enough. I got assigned into another project starting next month. 8 weeks this time. My boss asked if I was sure I was ready to travel again so soon. After everything, I told him yes. He laughed and said, "Work didn't betray you, huh?" I smiled. Something like that. Before I end this, there's one question people kept asking. Do I regret sending those screenshots? Not for a second. Rachel was about to marry someone who was lying to her, building a future on something that wasn't real. She deserved the truth, even if it hurt, even if it destroyed everything. Because some things are supposed to be destroyed. Illusions, lies, versions of people that only exist as long as no one looks too closely. The only thing I would change is that I wish I didn't have to be the one to do it. But I did, and I'd do it again. Anyway, that's it. I'm done with this chapter. I've got leftover pizza in the fridge and a show queued up that requires absolutely no emotional investment. And right now, that sounds perfect.